You look back and you go, whoa, that's how I was feeling. That was a real snapshot of me going through like a really hard time. I kind of used to think that a relationship would be successful if you were in love. I always kind of used to forget about compatibility. Oh, I love being calm. That's all I want these days. Really need to be reminded about my emotions and the fact that they exist. The problem is like when I studied music technology, I was the only girl in the class. That it's like it makes it feel like it's not for you. And then you start looking around you and going, oh, hang on a minute, this is bullshit. It's hard not to be a feminist now because it's just so intrinsically in who I am as a woman.
Hello, I'm Estelle, and you're listening to Européenne, the French podcast that talks about European women. Today I interview Art School Girlfriend, an electronic music producer from Wales. I met her in Geneva in the scope of Les Creatives Festival. Happy listening! So, hello Polly.
Hello.
And thank you very much for accepting this interview. We are here in Geneva for your concert within the scope of Les Creatives Festival, a festival which enhances feminist and female gaze arts, such as your music. So, Polly Mackie, aka Art School Girlfriend, you grew up in Wales and started music very soon as you got a drum at 8 and a guitar at 9. Your childhood was inspired by hardcore music and guitar, and you will lately admit that The Offspring and Nirvana have influenced your musical identity. This rock and roll attitude has marked the beginning of your musician career as you joined a band and lived to London in your early 20s. But the music you're really fond of takes its roots in Yeah Yeah Yeahs and Pixies song. So these influences follow you since you produced your first EP, Measures, in 2017, in which we can find the single Bending Back. Actually, by being solo, you could go back to a kind of music which has always attracted you, the electronic music. Another EP, named Into the Blue Hour, shows us your deep love of melancholy and introspection. Those feelings have in fact been exorcised during summer 2019 while you're living a terrible breakup. At the same time, you decided to work on the first album named Is It Light Where You Are? Definitely a breakup album, released in 2021, talking about love, disillusionment, and sadness between two women. The power of your music stands into the authenticity of the production and your willingness to make people dancing when you're on DJ sets. So actually, you are doing a show once a month in Foundation FM, which is a female-run radio show. And more recently, in August 2023, you released your second album called Soft Landing. This is a moody one talking about joy and immediacy. You tried to let you go into a creative process inspired by lofi movements, and even if you state that you wanted to exit the position of the bedroom producer, as Virginia Woolf says, woman needs their room of one's own. So do you feel this need, Polly?
Absolutely. I actually loved that essay. I remember I read it when I was younger, like a teenager, and I feel it happens a lot when then you're in your kind of mid-20s and you revisit stuff and you see it's like watching a film as you're older or any kind of art and you see it in a completely different light and you'll kind of resonate with different things within it. And I think especially given with like living in London, because you rent a room, like you're not just renting, a house or a flat. Like most of the time when you're in flat shares, it's a room that you're renting. So my room that I've rented throughout my whole life has always been my creative space because it's where I have had my studio set up. But luckily from January this year, I've managed to have an outside room, an external studio, which is really affecting the music that I'm making at the moment as well.
Okay, that was exactly a question I had, because I feel like first you did music in London with a band and it was completely different from what you did in Margate because you moved to Margate. And now can you say that if effectively the I don't know, the following album maybe gonna be different again? Or
yeah, I think so. And you don't quite realize how different things can go with each release until you kind of listen back. So I listened back to like my first EP, which was out in 2017, and it's super minimal, whereas I didn't think about that at the time. And actually the production has changed a lot. But for me, it just felt like such a gradual process and a slow thing. But then the difference is quite large. So yeah, the new one I think will be different again, just because I wrote Soft Landing, a year and a half ago now. So even what I'm listening to is different. Where I'm at is different. I've got the studio now, so yeah, I think it will be different again.
Okay, and if we listen to your, your show on Foundation FM, can we just have some identity of the future album, or?
Perhaps. I think that show for me is a really fun place to listen to music, because obviously when we listen to music a lot these days with like playlists on Spotify and things like that, all the radio is quite passive. You can allow the music to kind of wash over you, whereas when you're picking music for your show, you kind of really concentrate on it and you really kind of think about it and research it. And so the things I play on my show are a lot more experimental and left field than the music I make, and that definitely comes in a lot. But I am still definitely more of like a traditional songwriter at heart, but I definitely take a lot of those kind of like lo-fi, electronica influences and bring those into kind of the songwriting.
Okay, because I didn't understand if those shows, for example, in Foundation FM, were in live or with people in the room or inside the studio.
Yeah, so it's just me in a room recording it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I've done some live DJ sets on it, which has been a bit more upbeat, but mostly it's me just kind of in the room picking the songs for 2 hours and talking about them. So
okay, so do you like this feeling of being alone in a room but playing for people?
Yeah, it's quite nice. And it's that thing where I feel like there's not often where you just sit down and listen to music for 2 hours straight and think about it, and it offers that space. It's quite meditative, and a lot of the music I play is quite like meditative and repetitive and cyclical, and it's all about kind of beats and atmospheres. So yeah.
Okay. And talking about music, I had a question about you and the way you find the true self of your own. So has music been the best means of finding who you are truly?
I think especially when I was younger, it felt like a way out from the small town I was growing up in, and kind of it was my way to kind of have some passion that I could chase, to a big city with other people, and kind of it definitely helped me kind of figure out also, my sexuality and all that kind of stuff, because a lot of the time when you're writing lyrics, it can be quite subconscious, and a lot of the times those lyrics can end up like predicting the future, because you didn't realize you were feeling these things until it kind of came out on the paper, and then you look back and you go, whoa, that's how I was feeling. So they definitely affected me when I was younger. But now I feel like I use music less as like an emotional kind of crux and more as like my place to have fun. Like I really feel like I've gotten to a point where I feel, I think because I've learned more skills in terms of how to engineer and produce, I can kind of get to my creative aims really quickly. So it means that I can kind of just be like really full of ideas instead of trying to work it out so much.
Yeah. You did the journey of a musician from the beginning, like doing hours in studios and testing some stuff, but now you know exactly where you go, or is it sometimes like blurred? Or
I think it's about if you know how to do stuff, like just boring stuff like miking things up or reamping stuff or doing a bit of effects and things. If you know how to do it, for me it means that I can be more playful with it and then try stuff out. But what I'm trying to do at the moment is just try and move away from having my face at the computer, and so that means making music more in the room. So I'm kind of going back to a lot of instruments like guitar and bass and piano to start songs. And again, it's that thing where that's what I really enjoyed about being in a band. You were never looking at a computer when you were making your music. That would be insane. Like we were in a room making music with it, hearing it in the room. And I think after a good few years, or like most of my like late 20s, making music on a computer, I'm very much now wanting to kind of join those together in a really good way, but mostly focus on how I'm responding to it in the room at the time.
Okay, I understand. And I just go back a bit in what you said, because you talked about your childhood and the fact that music helped you to find yourself. Do you recognize you and yourself in Welsh culture?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Because I feel like growing up in Wales, it had such a intrinsic relationship to music that because I lived kind of on the border, that the surrounding English cities and towns just didn't seem to have in the same kind of DIY way, where it was all very homegrown. And because it was quite a small town, and you kind of had to make things happen yourself, which meant that everyone was really proactive, and we were all in like 2 or 3 bands, and everyone was putting on nights, and it became this really amazing little hub of creativity, which meant that when I was like 15, 16, I could play gigs and like once a week, and
it's crazy.
Whereas I think if I'd have grown up in either like a bigger city or even one of those surrounding English towns, they just didn't have that scene. And it meant that by the time I moved to London with my band, we all really knew how it works in terms of playing live and doing that kind of stuff, which really helps.
Okay, because your parents did music or not at all?
No.
Okay, that's fun.
My mum played a bit of guitar when she was younger. What's really funny though is that they're both really, really passionate about karaoke.
Okay.
They're obsessed with karaoke. And they have like a really, really legit karaoke system in their house, which has got like huge speakers and like mic stands.
Oh,
and
God.
So they've always been really passionate about music. Yeah. And a lot of my taste growing up was definitely defined by them. Like my mum was really into kind of like 80s pop. My dad was really into kind of slightly noisier stuff like Magazine and Velvet Underground and kind of anything that's slightly more new wave. And so having that influence, there was always music on in the house. And so they're very passionate about music, and they were really supportive of me being a musician, which definitely helped. But yeah, the karaoke thing, I think it must have been an influence, surely.
Okay. That's funny, because I think when we're kids and we see our parents like singing on karaoke, well, like upset, or we love them.
Yeah.
And what was your feeling? You were upset
sometimes? Oh, no, I
was
thrilled, because when I was like 8, all my friends used to want to come over to our house because we had this karaoke machine that no one had a karaoke machine back then. Like,
it's crazy.
It was like this really exotic thing in our village that we had a karaoke machine. So
you were a queen.
Endless fun after school.
Okay.
Lots of singing of Cher, I believe, around that time. But yeah, it was fun.
Okay. And what is the sentence you have the most heard as a kid?
From my parents?
Yeah, or even for, I don't know, your family or your sisters or brothers, I don't know.
The main thing I remember, which I feel really, really grateful for now, is that when I would like ask about, or they would be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my dad would always be like, well, what's your dream job? And it would... A lot of the time, I think that's actually quite a rare thing, because obviously we have to think about, security and all this kind of stuff. And they were just really passionate about us, me and my sister, just kind of doing what made us happy. And they were so supportive in that, which was an amazing thing to have. Okay, so you went to London with a band and they were happy. Yeah, they didn't mind that I didn't go to university. And, they happily paid my first few months' rent before I got a job, which was really helpful. And so, it's quite far. Like, I didn't know anyone in London. It was a real punt. Like, it was to move to a city, 5 hours away, with no plans. So, yeah. So, okay, we can go back now to your music. And in the Pod Diva, I hear it's a podcast about queer art and queer musicians and artists. You wonder if you do moody music because of your queerness or not. So have you thought about that question since? Yeah, I think about it a lot. And I've been doing a part-time master's in creative practice, which I've been obviously doing it in music, and it makes you be really self-reflective of your process, but also I was kind of analysing a lot of the music theory in my songs. And one thing I do a lot is, even if something is in the major key, so like the happy key, I'll do the melody on top or do kind of drone notes in the minor, the relative minor, which always gives this kind of happy, sad feeling.
Yeah.
And I had to, for my essay, I had to really analyze that, what that meant in terms of also like culturally, where we see that in other music. And one area we see that a lot is in dance music, like especially like queer club music. It's this idea of like the melancholic euphoria. And I think a lot of that is to do with the idea that even if we reach a place of euphoria and like community, and we've all feel that we've been through a slightly tricky journey to get there. And so this kind of like melancholy shadow is on it, but it makes it all worthwhile and all the sweeter because of that. But I was also just quite like a melancholy, moody teenager. And so obviously a lot of the music I listened to was, even if when I was a skater, when I was a kid, I was listening to, like quite dark music. And like, being an emo and playing guitar in my room.
Okay.
So, the kind of sadder side of music has always been what's got me.
Okay, so you belong to the team that if you are sad, you listen to sad music.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just to deepen the
you've got to wallow.
I see the kind of person you are.
Yeah.
You write a lot lyrics based on your how you feel, and love is a topic you explore a lot. So in How Do You Do It, you sing, love is a strange boat to ride. So why have you chosen this metaphor?
I think because I kind of used to think that a relationship would be successful if you were in love. I always kind of used to forget about compatibility. And I feel like each kind of relationship for me always felt like you were on this boat together.
Yeah.
And the love was the boat, but the kind of compatibility and everything around that in terms of who you were as people, you're like what you wanted out of life would be the kind of waves crashing against you. Which is why in that song, which is kind of a reflective of kind of where I am now, it's followed by no waves come to my side, as in this is like a really steady thing, because we've got the love, but we've also got everything else around it, which is really calm and kind of serene. So
yeah. And do you feel sometimes the need to not be calm?
Oh, I love being calm.
Okay.
That's all I want these days. I'd love... Yeah, I think because a lot of my 20s, I was definitely filled with a lot of kind of like wanderlust and would kind of chase chaos through the night. But now I'm very much kind of settled and in my brain. I definitely feel like as happy as I've been in terms of, again, knowing how to enjoy life and where I can find that. And that's the whole theme of this album, is about the idea that you can kind of throughout your 20s start pulling things in closer that make you happy, and then it's kind of just surrounding you and you don't need to go out and look for it.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And the aim of the podcast is to give advice to women especially, and to give advice and let them dare to do some things that they didn't dare to do. So what did you do, like crazy things in your brain, but maybe for us it's a normal thing, but what did you do that just ask you to go out your boundaries?
One really particular one was I think it was about 5 years ago now. So I got asked to play at this kind of queer techno rave at like 2 a.m, and it's called Chapter 10. And it's, literally like a sweaty box. Everyone's got their tops off. That's the vibe. But before that, 5 years ago, my music was all very slow BPM, very melancholy. It was not designed for the club in any way. But the guy who ran the night was like, oh, I just feel like, we could do something different. And he was like, if you get booed, it's fine. And I'm like, so I was like, oh, actually, what I'll do, for some reason, I just can't say no to a lot of things. So I just said yes, and was like, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out. And this was actually the first time I realized that a lot of my music that I'd made up to that point really worked in a dance setting if you basically changed the beats.
Okay.
So I took all of the music and spent a day like programming it all into loops, and I think it was 4 tracks, and I basically was triggering the sounds and the samples but with a kind of dance beat underneath it, and did like a live remix show for like 45 minutes, and it completely changed the perspective of my own music to me. So it was like, oh, music is way more flexible than I thought it was, and my music can actually evolve into lots of different things. And so that is, I think, especially, I always thought, my music, I thought it basically allowed me to think about genres being way more kind of cohesive, and think, well, I could never do that because I'm in this genre. I could never, experiment with dance beats because I do, lo-fi bedroom pop. Whereas actually after that, it gave me a whole new lease of life and a new perspective at looking at my own music, and it did actually get more kind of dance influenced after that.
Yeah, that's why you're here
tonight.
Yeah. That's interesting you talk about that, because I checked about your albums and I saw that you have decided to launch Is It Dark? Where You Are, which is basically your first album songs remixed by different artists. So why did you choose to do this?
Well, I'd kind of been messaging a bunch of my favourite producers for a while, and a lot of them I was playing on my radio show, and they made really interesting dance music, like really left field, really like amazing sound design, and it had a lot of soul in it. And I basically, it was an amazing opportunity for me to just hit up all my favorite producers and be like, I would love for you to do a version in your style of my song. And it was so fun getting them all. And then, because a lot of them are really amazing DJs as well, I'd be getting tagged in them playing in some amazing huge club in New York. And it's, again, that thing about the song having a completely different purpose. So I think I'm going to be doing it again for Soft Landing as well.
Okay. Oh, that's a good news, because I really liked that, because I first listened to Is It Light Where You Are, which is effectively, like I said, a breaking up album. So it's, you just want to go in the blanket with a cup of tea,
it's very
and
much
cry.
That vibe. Yeah, it's literally like, it's like going under a pillow, that album to me. It's like very slow and expansive and not dancey at all. Those sounds are there, but it's very kind of, meditative for sure.
Yeah. Have you had some, I don't know, some people that just tell you the contrary of that they feel, I don't know, they didn't feel emotional about the album and not moody but happy, or even I don't know.
On the most recent tour, I would say the type of fan I've developed since that album is a lot more emotional. Like when I've been speaking to them afterwards, like it's been incredible to hear how they've connected with some of those songs, and I've like heard some stories that like blew my mind about people coming out of like rehab, and it was like their album that they were listening to whilst they were in there, and it really helped them, and it just absolutely blows my mind, and I kind of can't comprehend it. But I think because that was a real snapshot of me going through like a really hard time, I feel like for a lot of people who are maybe feeling those feelings, it's always nice to have it reflected back at you, and it's kind of like you feel less alone, don't you, when you're listening to someone else having had the same thoughts that you've got. So that's always been amazing to hear.
But still, is it difficult for you to speak about that time and speak about this album again and again and again? Because I think it's a very constructive one for your fans. So is it difficult to take this charge?
No, I think it's healthy for me, because I'm the kind of person that will squash feelings down and not address them and just like keep calm, carry on. I still do it now. Like my girlfriend will be like, are you not like, are you like stressed? And I'll be like, no. And she's like, well, you haven't spoken for the whole day. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I'm stressed about this like giant thing I have at work tomorrow, So I'm just like, I really need to be reminded about my emotions and the fact that they exist. And then, so I think if for that example, so that breakup, which was like a huge thing in my 20s because it was such a long relationship, I would have just put it in a different part of my brain and just never thought about it again. Whereas this made me have to, it's like therapy. It made me actually process it. And then now it's like I can actually, what's nice is that a lot of those feelings would have been lost. Whereas now I've got kind of like a time machine of what my brain was actually feeling. And it actually makes you realize kind of where you are now, and also kind of respect that you were going through a bad time instead of just trying to forget about it. So yeah, it's healthy for me.
Okay, that's a good answer. I would like to talk about also about your feminist gaze, if I can say so. Yeah. I also ask my guests, what was your first feminist memory?
My first feminist memory.
That's a tricky one.
I remember actually being at a festival called The Great Escape in Brighton it would have been like 2009, 8 or 9, so I was a teenager, and there's an artist called Patrick Wolf, and he was playing in this big kind of circus tent, and I was watching everyone set up on stage, and I noticed that all of the crew were women, and this was like seeing like a tiger walking down a road in London at this point, that you never saw female engineers in live venues like in 2007 or 8. You just didn't, and it just blew my mind. And then I was researching it, and he actively only ever had female engineers working for him, so doing front of house, backline, all that kind of stuff. And it's one of those things where it really, I think, represents where we are now in terms of Instagram and things like that really helping, is that you can, if you can see it, you can do it. You can do it. Yeah. Not even do it, but just perceive that happens. Yeah. So I feel like, me seeing, I've had, female techs before and everything. And if I walk into a venue and I see that there's a female engineer, I don't think twice anymore. Yeah. Whereas at one point that to me was like, what? And the fact that it was like, what, is absolutely crazy to me now. Yeah. The fact that was like a shock. So I think that was a really important thing. And also Karen O from Yeah Yeah Yeahs and PJ Harvey were really important to me when I was 16. Because again, I didn't realise at that point, but I would pretty much accidentally was only listening to men, and I didn't even notice. And then you get these artists who come along and you're like, oh, you exist.
Thank you. Okay, that's really interesting, because I feel, but you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm not in this field, but I think like that in music it's a male dominated world. Yeah. And I think you were born in 1991.
Yeah, 91.
So you live through you live your childhood and etc. in a world where female singers were just a singer. Yeah, that's it, and they just represent the perfect Barbie on scene. And sometimes I feel that it moves and it go forward, but sometimes I feel that it's not that much going forward. So absolutely, what do you think about that? Do you think it's going forward or not that much?
I don't know. I have this conversation a lot. I feel like what you were just saying about in that era, women just being singers, like we still as women get the term singer-songwriter way more than men do, because it's like you have to be told that this person also writes the songs, and actually that wouldn't be presumed. I find that term singer-songwriter really interesting. But I think if I think about the amount of women I know in music now making music, they are also doing the production. They're all amazing producers, self-producers. But the problem is that in the industry, if we look at the statistics in the whole of the UK, I think it's the UK or the world, I can't remember, it's one of the two, only 2% of all personnel behind the scenes who work on the albums, like mixing engineers, mastering engineers, recording engineers, are women. And so even if we are having more women being the artists, the people who are still doing the behind the scenes work, it's still so male dominated, and that is going to affect the music in a massive way, and it's going to affect basically everything around it, because I've definitely have had some bad experiences in studios with kind of power dynamics, and everyone I know has. And so I think if the place where the music is getting made can have more women and kind of non-binary people involved, it will have a better effect for everyone, I think.
Yeah, do you feel this in Foundation FM, for example, or?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's definitely getting better. I think the new generation of like studio assistants, there's way more women. But I mean, I teach music production at university, and it's even with the younger generation, they're like 18-year-olds, I would say it's still like 5-10% girls.
Okay.
And hopefully that will just keep changing. But the problem is like when I studied music technology, I was the only girl in the class. That it's like it makes it feel like it's not for you. And so, yeah, it's better, but it's definitely nowhere near what it should be.
As I'm French, so I don't know how it works in UK, but do you think like in Wales it's different than in Scotland and in England and in Northern Ireland, or do you think it's a general feeling and generally girls just not there?
I feel like it's probably better in the kind of major cities just because of things like access. I feel because music is such a classist industry as well, that it's pretty much just dominated by the middle classes, that if we then add gender into that as well in the regions, it's going to be, even less. So I think, the cities have probably got it better, but I think it's still loads of work to do.
Yeah. It's sure. So do you know personally a woman who inspired you in this theme of feminism and doing things?
Not personally, but again, I'm always talking about PJ Harvey. I think because she completely changed what I thought the industry would expect from a woman. So she kind of she came up with a different character for every album. She, didn't ever seem to care about being perceived under the male gaze in any way but a slightly ironic way. And it just felt that she just literally didn't care and was so true to her own artistic vision that I just massively respected that and hadn't really seen that before. So that was definitely a big one.
Yeah, and I can feel that you like this influence of not caring about anyone and just go in the deepest way you can go. And we talked about just before about your queerness and how it affects your music. Mm-hmm. But do you think it's important to not caring, to go in the deepest way you can go, or do you think even if you care, you can take many opinions and do a music you like, even if you take it into account opinions? Or
I feel like I don't think I could make anything but the music that I make, and so I don't think I could probably try and push it in certain directions if someone was kind of asking me to, as if I was doing it on spec or something and I needed to make I don't know, a certain type of track. But I feel like it's so just completely naturally what comes out that I couldn't really change it if I tried. Which would make me quite a bad if I had to write music for a children's television program, it would be I couldn't do it. So
they're gonna cry.
They're gonna become really moody. So I think, even with this album, it's so funny because I've been talking about how it's the happy, joyful album, but everyone's the lyrics are definitely that, but the music is still really, quite melancholy. So but I feel like I would love to have way less abandon than I do. I'm quite a naturally slightly more reserved private person. I wish I had the kind of abandon that some of these performers have, like Karen O, to be able to have that release on stage, for example. I would love that, but that's just not me. As much as I would try, I think everyone would just call it out straight away. It's not real. But I feel that I think it's important to kind of try and figure out what it is you want to do and just go for it, for sure.
Have you learned about feminism because of bad experiences, or because you were surrounded by the right person that helped you to
I don't really
know
know.
about it?
I remember someone asked me at one point, I can't remember how I was, they were just like, are you a feminist? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I was
Maybe.
like, and they were like, you should be. I was like, yeah, I should be. I think I was literally like 16. Like, whereas now 16-year-olds these days are like, you know,
Yeah.
so aware of everything.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was that thing where it's just like, I think it's like those experiences I mentioned before. It's kind of, you have like these moments of realization, and then you start looking around you and going, oh, hang on a minute, this is bullshit. But I think it's definitely, we all definitely have those kind of experiences that we look back on and we go, oh yeah, that was not okay, or that was definitely the wrong dynamic, or kind of felt a bit taken advantage of there, or if I'd have been a guy that wouldn't have happened. And so that happens, you know, sometimes on a monthly basis, weekly basis for a lot of people, especially with the music. So I think that's the thing of kind of, I think it's hard not to be a feminist now, because it's just so intrinsically in who I am as a woman to kind of notice these things. And also, you know, being in a teaching environment where I teach in a studio, which is normally a very male-dominated place, and a lot of students walk in on their first day and are kind of surprised to see me. And I was like the first woman to be, you know, a leader of a module which was studio-based in that university. So I think that is an interesting thing, and I even feel it sometimes with some students where you kind of, and it's always happened in the studio environment when I've been with some kind of co-producing or kind of different and it's only happened a few times and I haven't worked with them again, but it's that thing where you have to prove yourself, and so you only get their respect like way later on, a few hours in, once they know you can like work a synth or like know anything that they know. Whereas I think the difference is that kind of a lot of the time a guy can walk in the room and they have to disprove themselves and kind of prove that they don't know stuff because they kind of walk in like this, whereas women walk in like this. So I think that is just something you kind of get used to, but always keep noticing for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting, but it's not only in the music field and in music, because I talked about this with an alpinist, and she said to me like, I would say when we go to mountain, I never go first, because I'm saying in my mind like a man will go first and just show the rest of the group which is the right path. But actually when they are between women, she said to me, I go first because I know that I can go first. And it's really just I think something in your mind, in my mind, in women's mind, that we have to, I don't know, to split, to separate, to
100%. I play football as well, and I've like, again, it's good dynamics on the football pitch are really exposing about characters or kind of what people intrinsically think deep down, and it's like, oh yeah, you haven't passed to me once, because you're not even noticing. And if I told you that you don't pass the ball to me or any of the women on the pitch, you would be like, what? Oh my god. But it's so deep down, I'm gonna just automatically pass to all the other guys on the pitch and not the women. So it's all these things that are just, again, and a lot of these people would never, if you raised it to them, they would be so distraught with themselves. Or like, I've had it where I do it, like someone was telling me that they had a new job at a record label, and the interviewer was really harsh, and I was like, oh, what was he like? And he was like, oh no, the head of the label's a woman. And I was like, oh, here's me. You know. So it happens to all of us for sure.
But in another way, I think we have to be indulgent with our generation, because as you said, you live your childhood in the 90s. I live mine in the 2000, and I feel like we just learn from the beginning that things are like this and not like this, and girls do this and boys do so I think we have to be indulgent and to understand that we don't learn things the same manner our neighbor do. And because I see in feminist field sometimes I don't know, some people that blame women that are not very far away in their process. But do you think it's the same thing in the music? And do you think that women sometimes just not there, and even things they can't do because they are not very far away?
Yeah, it's all about, it's conditioning, isn't it? And it's opportunity. And like I've probably accidentally said some really non-feminist stuff in my life because that's kind of what I thought at that time was probably the norm or correct. And then that's the thing, we constantly change our perspectives as we kind of move through life and get more life experience and figure out what's possible. So yeah, I think it's always a learning process. And yeah, I hate the idea that we kind of shut down conversations because the person opposite you doesn't agree with what you say. I think that's the perfect opportunity to have the conversation if that's the case then.
Yeah. And to be calm.
Yeah, exactly.
As you are. So, thank you. I have a random question for you because I think we almost finished. So, are you afraid of people who don't like animals?
I find them really strange. And I've got some friends who don't like animals, so I can't speak too harshly. But I have a theory that they're unable to see the animal's soul.
Okay.
And that's why they can't emote or empathize with the animal. So like I've got 2 dogs, and a few years ago I only had 1 dog, and I was living in a flat share with my best friend, and they literally, and he was the same, they didn't acknowledge each other for 2 years. They like coexisted, and he would ignore her and she would ignore him, and it was like, it worked okay, but you know, if I'd asked her to look after him, she'd be like, no.
That's not possible.
Whereas I've got so many friends, like me and AJ, my drummer who's here, we just every day just sending each other dog memes. So
okay,
yeah. It's a good question. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, but I think it's saying a lot about the people I interviewed.
She'd be proud of that story. She's fine.
But I understand her because when I was in Ireland, my housemate just asked me to taking care about her dogs, and she just put literally pig here on the table, and she just left a word like, "Can you give this to my dog?" And I was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah, you have to get a condition to it. The worst one is when you get like little like furry rabbit's ears.
Oh shit!
And it's quite intense.
But okay, I didn't ignore.
That's good. You acknowledged its existence. That's good.
Just to finish, I'm used to ask my guest some question, and it takes the form of a European portrait, like a Chinese one. So I will ask you, if you were a European capital, which would it?
That is really hard.
Yes, that's the hardest questions. Each time the people are looking at me like, I don't know.
That is so hard. But I can't say London because we're not European now.
You can.
I'll pick London.
Europe is a continent.
Okay. We're not talking about the EU. We're talking about Europe. Yeah, I would have to say London. I'm not fancy enough to be Paris.
Okay.
I'm not hot enough to be Barcelona. But London, I think, has that thing where it takes a little bit of time to get to know it, but then it's great.
And if you were a culinary specialty?
I would be mashed potato.
Okay. That's not very original, but
it's my favourite food.
Really?
And I think it can go with absolutely anything.
That's
that
true.
or chips, actually. I think a bowl of chips at the pub.
Yeah.
That was what I'd want to be. Because no one is ever angry at chips or upset about chips.
That's true.
Maybe I'm just too much of a people pleaser at this point. This is exposing a lot about me. This is why I've never gone to therapy, because I would hate about actually realising these things about myself.
That's the aim. And if you were a drink, it's a tricky one because we don't really think about that in daily life.
No.
I can give you some example if you...
Yes, please.
Me, I would be an Italian coffee, for example.
Why?
Because I like the taste, and because it's a drink you can share, or you can just drink on your own, and I like it.
Okay, so we're talking about the benefits of the drink rather than what it says about our personality. Or have I gone too deep about this?
Really. There is no very...
I am hopefully... my favourite thing is going to the fridge and there being one last cold bottle of beer.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And finally, and after that, you're free. if you were a touristic place in Europe? What would it go for?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of tourist destinations.
Yeah.
Oh, man. This is really hard. I'm trying to think of one in Wales. Snowdon.
That's good.
There we go.
Good answer. Okay, so thank you very much, Polly.
No, thank you for having me.
And you're going to on stage in a few hours?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Yeah, excited. I've never been to Switzerland before, never mind Geneva, so this is our first time playing here.
So welcome.
And everything went well in soundcheck. That's always my fear. Everything arrived off the plane.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy now.
Okay, have a good stage.
Thank you very much.
Bye. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. If you did, please let me know. You can leave a mark or a comment, and you can subscribe to get in touch with European. I'm looking forward to broadcast new episodes in English. And in that time, take care. Bye.